You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to Night Vision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies that keep it all from us. Welcome to Night Vision Radio. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett, and we have an exciting show planned tonight. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone to please check out returnofthetroubadour.com and like Return of the Troubadour on Facebook. These guys are working hard to encourage musicians, all musicians, and including young musicians, to realize how important music is to everybody. I mean, my goodness, it's the soundtrack of our lives, and music can, make you rise to anger. They can soothe you. It can, bring back all kinds of memories. Music is very important in everybody's life, and it's important that our musicians are working towards sending out positive messages. So Return of the Troubadour has set up a contest, a song contest, and they're looking for a song that has a positive message that's uplifting, and they want to help musicians enough that they're willing to put up a grand prize. It's like $5,000 in gold coins. So check them out if you're a songwriter or if you know one. Send them over to returnofthetroubadour.com, and please like them on Facebook. Thanks so much. We appreciate that. Those guys are doing good work. Anyhow, tonight we're here to talk about some new discoveries. I don't know if everyone that's listening has heard of the Newport Tower, but it's a mysterious little structure in Newport, Rhode Island, that has long been the subject of speculation, of research, of legends and myths. And tonight we have with us Cort Lindahl, who's been here before. You know Cort. He's an author and a researcher, an archaeologist, and he's been into this subject matter. And he has introduced me to a young man by the name of Gary Gianotti from Connecticut, who has done extensive research at the Newport Tower. In fact, it's just down the road from his house. And so he's been there lots and lots of times. He's also very expert at reading engravings and the like, seals, flags, family crests, all that type of information. So this is all going to come into play tonight with what Gary found just in the last few days at the Newport Tower. So good evening and welcome to Cort and to Gary. Welcome, guys.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hey, great to be here.
Hi, Gary.
Hello. How are you?
So glad you could be here. Now, Cort, you want to just start us out real quickly, and then we're going to let Gary run with it and talk about what he's recently found there. But can you just give us a little bit of background on the Newport Tower, sort of just common knowledge, and also possibly some of the theories about where it might have come from or what the age of it might be?
Certainly. Well, we know that really the origins of the Newport Tower is a large mystery, that really nobody knows when it was built. It appeared on old maps, such as the late 16th century map of Verrazano, said there was a structure in that location. So that's very interesting, and that fits some of the theories we'll discuss. But it really is a mystery as to exactly when it was built. And really the three major theories on that are that it was a colonial windmill, built in early colonial times, and it is referred to in Governor Arnold's papers briefly here and there as being a windmill. But we know that could be the hidden meaning of it or interpretation of what it is for those that were in the know. And so the second
So the
theory,
windmill part could have been a cover story, basically.
that's possible, and it is entirely possible that in the end that could be true, but there's lots of evidence that people like Scott Wolter and Jim Egan have gathered that says that is not the case, and it was built earlier. So next we would have Jim Egan's theories about the Newport Tower being an horologion, or a tower meant to keep time or mark a position on Earth, would be part of my theory, but I agree with him in that it seems to fit a series of towers that were built in the legacy of the Tower of the Winds in Athens, which over time gained a lot of talismanic and spiritual overtones that in an almost alchemical way or pagan way in addition, but also ultimately practically works to mark territory or mark a point on the Earth that can be compared to other locations on the Earth. So Jim's theory is that people during Elizabethan times came and built the tower for very similar purposes to what I'm saying, and that's how it was done. And he's gathered a lot of evidence to back that up, including records of expeditions there by Englishmen and the possible naming of Newport Harbor the Dee River after John Dee, who may have been involved in that, and that's entirely possible. So,
And John Dee is a well-known alchemist, so if he had anything to do with it, certainly you might think that there might be some sort of celestial alignment or something about the particular placement of it.
Right. And John Dee also taught navigation to the Royal Navy for quite a long time. So he was well versed in finding his location on the Earth using the technology of the day, and really was the kind of person that would have been privy to any hidden information or more accurate means of doing this. And I believe they did.
So Jim Egan's view is that the building of the tower had something to do with John Dee?
Yes, that is.
And so what time period would that have been?
That would have been the late 16th century or the late 1500s into the Elizabethan era, which was right at the end of the century there into the beginning of the 17th century.
But I know what I've seen some of the photographs from what Gary has found, and which, by the way, go to his Facebook page. It's public, and have a look at some of those pictures. There's a couple things on my Facebook, but not many. But it appears that there may be some dating actually written into the stone, which would put it earlier than that. If that's the case, and if I know there's some experts that are looking into Gary's finds. If it should be corroborated that it was, an earlier date, it doesn't necessarily mean that John Dee wasn't involved with the Newport Tower, in my mind.
Exactly.
It would just mean that, he was using it or actually, had something to do with it at a later date.
Well, that would be part of my thoughts on the scheme of things, because that will lead us to Scott Wolter's theory that it was done much earlier during the 14th century. But I really think that it's possible that both of these gentlemen are correct in their assumptions in a way, because these kind of axes or points on the Earth were taken over, from one group to the other. There is a kind of opposition in philosophy between Elizabeth and Mary the First, that was the queen before her, and that she was Catholic and Elizabeth was Protestant. So John Dee was kind of active in both of the monarchies and court politics of both of those queens, and in fact was imprisoned by Mary the First for casting horoscopes. So he. I feel they might have came there to take over an axis or a significant point that had been claimed earlier by Scotsmen, or theories that are possibly Knights of Malta as well. We've uncovered some evidence that says that could be true. But this would more closely fit Scott Wolter's theory during the 14th century that people came there and aligned the tower to point the way to the Kensington runestone, which incidentally, the octagonal orientation of the tower also points to the runestone in Kensington.
Wow. Now let's get Gary into the conversation. Gary, can you tell us just a little bit about your research and your expertise and how it came to be that you were examining this particular site? I know Cort has told me a lot about some of the work that you do, and you were sort of helping him with some of his research in terms of his site locations that he's looking at around the globe and the correlation between those sites. And now he's looking at the families that were involved in the construction of most of these places. So can you tell me what it is that's your area of expertise in this whole research area?
Mine involves the tracking down from 5 or 6 years ago. I've been a colonial historical researcher since I was a kid, and genealogy, artifacts, relics. I've always just a fascination for the study. And some years ago, I became a member of a board of the National Museum of the American Revolution, where I got into the study of the Great Seals, because I identified the oldest surviving Great Seal in the United States, and the only one from the American Revolution that I know exists. And this art and study of this history had taken me into the study of Robert Scott, which is a very secret man that was with the U.S. Mint, and he was an artist beyond recognition when it comes to many things. People couldn't identify his identity to who his family was. This study with genealogy, where I've had great luck with genealogy over the years and studying other important families with historical flags, I was able to take this history and find out for the first time who this guy's father was and family. And these are the big players of the royal family lines that go all the way back to the Stuarts, to the well, you name it. There's it's hard to say because it's just
to the Sinclairs, to the Stuarts, to the Ansons,
directly to the Sinclairs. When you see the Douglas family name, they are Sinclairs. So one of the big finds last year, winter, was that the surname Scott was changed, or it was originally Fleming. So a Lord Fleming, a Norman Crusader, married a very famous royal woman named Dunbar to the kings of all the king lines, the English and the ancient Dalrida lines. They get married. They have a son. No one knew about it really, and he changes his name to Scott. Scott becomes Douglas. Douglas is married to Sinclair, who built Rosslyn. And then you have their lords with their properties, the Carver or the Cupbearers, and another one was another Lord Fleming. So you have this direct line of powerful royal families and with different names. And so I was able to rewrite and identify for the first time the identity surname of Scott for the origins of Scotland, which is a very big deal that right now the academics at the University of St. Andrews still will not post this or allow this to be said, not even the country or the media. It's hysterical because most of the people in Scotland who believe their name is Scott as being Scottish, they're Norman. It's the truth.
That's really well. I was looking with interest at the election last week in Scotland, whether or not they would secede from the United Kingdom. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if we, had another monarchy, the King of Scotland returns or the Queen of Scotland. That would be really interesting. But it was defeated, so I guess we won't find that out just yet anyway. But now, how does all this, these families, these crests, these symbols that you've come to be so familiar with and be able to recognize and pick out these patterns and these symbols, how does this all tie in to what you've done in the last few days over at the Newport Tower?
There's a great deal. a lot of the art that's done in paintings, coins, engraving, it's not much at all different than what you see in a lot of different stone art or sculpture. And here, it's the difference of being able to identify graffiti, let's say, from whenever this place was built all the way into the 1800s, and separating that and finding symbols and information on it that you're trying to break the difference down of what could truly be original to the tower. And it's a very hard thing to do, and a lot of wonderful professionals have been trying to figure this out for a while. And for me, having studied so many pieces of art glass and relics and silver and engraving, and the list goes on, that it's kind of easier for me to find stuff that's beat up and worn out, especially on rocks. It's easier. It's not as complicated. And just am able to find things and see exactly like the example of what you're seeing is what I found that has been overlooked by people. So,
but on that particular day, you weren't really looking for anything, right?
No.
Weren't you out there to give instruction to somebody?
Yes, this is the most exciting thing, is that there's a wonderful group called NARA. It's the New England Antiquities Association. And this group of people go and study all the different sites of stone and ancient sites said to be from the Celts or the Byzantines or ancient people, and trying to identify it. And I wound up contacting a wonderful person that I really do like, a Mr. Steve DiMarzo, who is the representative for the Rhode Island, Massachusetts area. And the whole idea was that I had fed him a great deal of my private and personal documents that are very valuable. If you wanted to go out and find treasure and relics and you learn this stuff, you could go out and probably wind up learning how to find important relics that could then become very valuable down the road. But it was just amazing because we hit it off well, and he spent a lot of time wanting to learn about different angles of seeing this art and applying this art to some of these ancient sites and places that maybe we'd be able to pick out symbols and things that might be helpful, not just for the tower here, but really for all the other sites. And so Newport was really kind of like a meeting ground to get together and to get to know each other and spend some time looking at the site. And it was just, we had not expected the first find of that day to happen within minutes before we left. And that's really because Steve's 6'4". He's a tall man, and he was looking up, and I overlooked a symbol where I took a picture of it. It looked like a 3, an E, one of these ancient E's you see on these old relics going way back too. And he caught it with his eye. We went up and got close. I saw a 1, and then we started seeing a 5. We saw an 8. We couldn't see a 2, but we saw the numbers. And we're looking at it, we're thinking it's a 2 in numbers. And then, we took these pictures, saw them later that night, and then we realized that it has a potential at maybe really being a date, a set of numbers, a date, in Arabic, because it's so faded and worn out like you can't imagine. And so it was very exciting, and we wound up made plans to go back again. But there were some other finds found on another rock that I had taken pictures of that people were already aware of also. And it's kind of an odd rock. It had, it looked like there's a name, let's say a person that doesn't know how to engrave, right? It's not good and clean, and it looks more modern to me. And then to the right of it, there's a set of writing that looks like J.R.R. Tolkien type art, and everyone knows Tolkien is he's an actual runist. He was an educator in that field, so that's where I could say it kind of looks in a fashion like his art. And I tried to explain to some of these guys, and Steve saw this too, that his associates, that from the left side you have these big bold writing that's just not from a real professional, and then on the right side you have this other art, and that somewhere as they flow into the middle, the people on the left side overlap certain symbols and some numbers. And I thought maybe at first they were dates. I don't think so. They could be, but there were numbers or symbols there. And the one thing I did find out tonight in the last couple of days, actually with really looking at it, is that it looks like 3 sets of numbers of 1800, but the third set is actually, it looks like a 1, but there's really an X and not an 8, and these other 2 numbers are not numbers on the bottom, they're symbols. And if you look at them close, you'll be able to tell. And especially with the X, there's just no way. It's an X, and it almost has a hook on the top of the left side. So that exists. And so from there, we made plans to go back there for another trip the following week, which we did.
And so did Nira go back out there with you?
Steve was there, and a few of his associates that I had never met before, and they were busy doing a lot of different things, and Steve and I were going around. But believe it or not, actually early on, before they even got there, I got time to look at the stone and from outside this iron gated fence, and I started to really pay attention and look, and I noticed a stone that it appeared to have what looked like numbers, another set of dates. And I just didn't want to go and say anything when everybody showed up, and I really kept it to myself because of the worry about, I don't know who I'm meeting. I don't know who any of these people are, and I just wasn't sure of the situation because.
Well, it's kind of tricky too when you're coming out with something that really hasn't been found before. It's like it's kind of tricky. There are some people have their own agendas and their own theories, and sometimes people don't want to hear what counters what they're already thinking, or what they've been putting in a lot of hard work, and maybe this is going to kind of blow their theory out of the water, or maybe it doesn't have to. But I think it's sort of people's first impulse somehow, or some people anyway, to sort of poo-poo anything new that comes out or that's found. But I liked what you said to me earlier about, hey, let's invite everyone to have a look at what you found. People who are just interested, researchers, experts, everybody should have a look. And I know that you have some experts right now that have found this very interesting and are looking at it, and so we'll have to see later on, what the final analysis. But I thought it was important to point it out right away, and also to give credit where credit's due, and let people know that Gary Gianotti was the first person to come across this, and then we'll probably be learning more over time about what you found. Would you say that was a fair statement?
The second set of dates and all the other information after, but the I had Steve there. We were taking snapshots together in different areas too. Yeah, but like the first set of numbers, that's Steve's eagle eyes. I mean, he is dynamite. This guy's eyes, and
that's amazing.
He made the first catch, because I would have let it go and gone home and then looked at the photos. But if that photo wasn't good at what I've taken, if it really is there, I would have probably had a chance that I could have overlooked it, even from a photo, because you really need to take a lot of photos if you can. So I would have just snapped a couple, and if the odds are, if I didn't catch it, we wouldn't be here right now.
Now, am I right or wrong that there has been sort of some theory proven in some way or another about the alignment of the building, as far as, isn't this one of the structures, Cort, where, at solstice time, it comes, the light comes in, or am I completely confusing this with LaGrange and other places?
No. Scott Wolter did identify that,
that's what I thought.
On the solstice at 9:30 a.m., that there's an alignment through one of the archways that, as I was saying, also mimics the orientation of the building itself. And also, I might note that the more modern octagonal walkway they've put around the tower matches this as well.
Cort, one sec. There's that, remember I told you about the sticks that are up in the window? They put them in there? That was the Nair guys that had mentioned that. It's another type of way you put these sticks in, and it casts light and has to do with celestial too.
Sure, that could be like a sundial as well. but I don't remember you telling me that. But that's
I thought it did. Well, we've covered so much information. Our head's been spinning for weeks.
Yes.
I know it.
And it's also interesting.
Now, were most of these... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would point out that in colonial era, there's also another structure very similar that was documented being built in 1714 in colonial Williamsburg in Virginia, that was also originally built as a church and today known as the Powder Magazine. And it has octagonal, an array too, with alignments associated and associated places aligned along the octagon, including the International Peace Garden, which, with Gary's help, we've linked together all the same Norman and Habsburg families building almost all of the structures that I've been talking about, including several in Europe, and including the King's Knot at Stirling Castle and Shugborough Hall's Tower of the Winds, as we talked about before. But that's the tradition we're seeing at work here. So it's really easy to fit the whole scheme of what's going on at the Newport Tower compared to other places that I've studied. And all these places are related to astrology and stellar alignments and lunar alignments, as some people point out. And I feel sure that they've arrayed significant places. For instance, even the Powder Magazine points very near the Newport Tower and the Narragansett Runestone. So it points right through Newport Harbor there, and then both the Newport Tower and the Powder Magazine in colonial Williamsburg point to the Magdalen Islands in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is part of French Arcadia. And there's a lot of more interesting place names in the Magdalen Islands that suggest something is afoot there as well.
Yeah, the Magdalen Islands. That sounds interesting right there. Well, I tell you, it's so much, and it seems to me like so much of this information is sort of coming out. It's almost like the dam has broken, and every other week somebody's finding something that is another piece of the puzzle. I know you've been working on some stuff, Cort, and we'll probably do that in a future show. But it seems like some of the pieces are finally coming together in some of these mysteries, particularly where they pertain to, what's these families, the Disposini, the bloodline families, if you will, the royal families. And why do you think it's all coming out now?
Mind if I
or does it just seem that way?
No, I'll tell you something that's really special. Really, this is what I know as a researcher, and I try to over the years, I've been contacting lots of people, and what I can honestly say is, all right, we're talking about Sinclairs and royal families and descendants, right? Well, there are a lot of descendants that are offshoot descendants, people that care, that are doing such great work today, that these are the people that I'm finding and linking to with the information that I'm trying to find. And when you find those ones that share, this is the big difference, because there's all of the original families who are so off shot from these families. They're all coming together. There's so many great researchers. Academics are doing such a great job, like beyond anything with the old history research today, that it's just everything is starting to open up. And the other thing too is all of this information that we're learning with all of this art and everything associated and towers and whatever, it's so connected and so related that everything when it comes to art and the symbols, it's all there in front of us, and a lot of us just don't see it. It's there, and I'm telling you. And that's the point. People are overlooking so much that already exists. It was never, a lot of it's not meant to be hidden. It's just that it's been lost or been just kept as is, forgotten.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think there are, people that are not only connecting the dots for themselves, but people that are getting connected up. You have a certain area that you're going down. Cort has another sort of, my friend Gloria Amendola, who lives right down the road from you there in Connecticut, she's going down a different track. So I think that what's going on is that, a lot of people are quietly just beavering away and doing their research. And I think we're getting somewhere because people are connecting up, just like Cort was sort of on his track with his, geometry, his maps, and his alignments, and then what you were doing was brought into that, and that started making sense with what he was finding with the families that were involved in those particular sites.
Cort and I together, when we involve everything that we know, all of his work and all of my work is now just skyrocketed. We can't even keep up with what we're finding now. We can't even keep up with documenting it. There's so much now that these doors are open, and he and I are just leapfrogging off each other's back. And that's one of the reasons why I made it an important point to be able to open up to people at NARA, such as Steve, this wonderful gentleman, and some of his associates, is because that the same thing is going to happen. And if this example of what I can do here can be applied to the other sites throughout New England, then you know what, it's going to open up more doors. And it's just not me; it's just people coming together that click. And
wow, this is also well, but we got to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Gary Gianotti and Cort Lindahl. Hang on, everybody. We're back. Thank you for sticking with us. We're here on Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett, and I am talking with Cort Lindahl and Gary Gianotti. Gary has just in the past days made some discoveries of some etchings and engravings on the stones at the Newport Tower. So, Gary, it looks to me like there are some dates on some of those stones. Dare we talk about that?
Sure. The big one that was found, first identified by Steve DeMarzo. You can look at it. You can see it shaded. I can see it shaded. Some people can't, but I just have a lot of experience at looking at beat up relics and, experience with it. And you'll see a dark shade right there that's around the numbers, real dark. And there's a theory, because the whole tower was covered in a stucco. That's not a theory, it's what's been told, stucco. And there's a section of a post that has a bit of it left there. One of the theories now, having talked to, from your recommendation to the scientist, remember we were talking about, we had talked, and some of these gentlemen at NARA said that there's no way that my theory is that the stucco came up to the outer edges of this rock, and then where the numbers were meant to be exposed. That's why we're seeing this deterioration of the center area where the numbers are weathered, exposed, and then the outside edges were covered. So that's why it looks newer on the outside edges. And having talked to the gentleman that you had mentioned, this professor, geologist, who's well known all over the world, he said that regardless, I guess, not even with the dates, but just with that weathering and where the stucco was, you can actually probably date the stone from anywhere from, for trying to get a 350 to a 700 year period, it can probably be done. So that's really exciting on this one here. And I was told by some other people that it's impossible, and they didn't see the dates, and so that's okay. You're going to get people that are very cautious with their work or anything in that sense. But we had a couple people on ladders. I even had an old lady on a ladder in tourists that were passing by, and they saw it. So, but there was a person, her husband, that couldn't see it so well, and then there was a few other gentlemen that did. And the only people that really didn't see it was one of the men in the group from NARA, and but he's just being as cautious as he can, and professional, because you just don't want to go crying wolf. You need to have as much evidence that you can. You have to really.
That's right, and I've found that time and again in talking with people who've made these discoveries and similar things, happening where. It took a long time for the establishment, the archaeological establishment to finally come around. It's like no one wants to stick their neck out. And, and in a way it's good. We need caution. Certainly, I'm not saying I have no expertise in this area that I can make an opinion about it. But what I can see is that it's very exciting, and it's certainly something new that we really need to look into. And I'm so glad that there are some experts that are taking note enough just to really have a look without, just dismissing it out of hand right at the beginning. So I'm really excited to hear what the upshot of that is, and we'll update everyone here on NightVision when we get some of those results back. But now, were these etchings or these engravings primarily on the outside of the tower or on the inside?
They're kind of around the posts and inside and out, I believe. There was a couple that you could see from the inside, but mostly outside. And again, I don't know. I mean, if these things were covered with stucco, I mean, it's just, were they done after the fact? It's hard to say. Were some of these, my theory was with this, showing that the one that was exposed, would that be exposed to let people know that that's an actual claim date? That's a theory. Just don't know yet. And then this other rock, I want to tell you something neat. The other rock that I told you that had it looked like the type of writing that was J.R. tokens, right? Well, I sent some pictures to Scotland to an educator in the academics, a teacher, a professor, who said that a couple of these letters on that rock, the small one, that where I told you everyone collided, maybe some defacing, that there were a couple of runes that person found that are said to be from the 1100s, and that they are Anglo-Saxon. Now think about that. And everyone's got their mindset on everything being Templars and Vikings, but Anglo-Saxon. And you have to remember that all of those families were also married to the Vikings, and they're also married to the Normans. So you had an intermix right there. So who knows what type of writings they were practicing. So there's going to be some theory with that. But who knows? It could change. Maybe this might be something that was done in the 1800s, because they did decorative forms of writing that carried on in rune style. I don't even, is it rune? I mean, it looked to me like there were a couple letters that I translated. I tried to, and it mentioned God, a need of God for man. And if that's, right, I mean, I'm not a rune expert, but it could be. I mean, I'm not saying it is.
Now, this gentleman that you sent some pictures to, he is a rune expert, right?
A teacher of it in the universities.
Right. So he's going to, he's giving you his opinion that some of the writing is Anglo-Saxon. Believes that two were, two runes, but everything else is too hard for that person to say.
Right, and we might point out too that some of these runic forms of writing were used as ciphers later in history as well.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility too. Even if it was 11th century, wouldn't be unheard of for later people, like during the 14th century or even later, to use those as a secret way of communicating as well.
Yeah, and we also found a bunch of graffiti like W.S. Dyer. Well, W.S. Dyer, the Dyers were very famous. This is a regular carved rock, perfect. You could see it as clear as could be. It could be William Dyer, who was the first attorney general with the Anne Hutchinson group that settled there. And this man's family goes back to from his father's line to the royal families. Had a brother that was with the Knights Garter and was set to be a Rosicrucian. So I mean, that's an amazing piece. I saw another graffiti, Hewitt. Hewitt families were very well known in Connecticut and Rhode Island. Another person named Fox, and I'm pretty sure some of the Foxes were with the British government during the course of the American Revolution. I'm not sure what other Fox would have been here, but I just know of names from colonial history in that sense. Then there was another interesting thing that when you look at this cement that's still stucco surviving, it was overlooked that there's an X I found on that last patch of stucco that exists. You could put your finger in it. It's hard to see from the image, but if you follow the real dark cement and go to the right and then go up that little peninsula part, the X is right over there in the little whitish section and crosses over onto that dark section. What is it? Is it a hooked X? I didn't see a hook. Is it a St. Andrew's cross or runic? We don't know yet. But there was some other interesting finds, and especially with Cort on one special stone. A couple other ones. There's a little grouping that I showed a picture of that. There's some stuff that really does look like a couple of Anglo-Saxon ruins. And Cort, you want to mention a couple of the ones that we saw?
Well, there's a lot of X shapes that you found in the carvings that you found, obviously.
Yeah.
And just from what I can see from looking through the different types of runes, they seem to resemble that type more than any other. So that's a good start, at least. And like, I guess, we have to say it could turn out that all these are later editions, or we don't know for sure. We do need more qualified people to look, but it is strange. They do look older. They do look worn somewhat.
Yeah.
And that's why that some of them are hard to read. But at least in all the photographs that you've taken, you can see that there is an inscription there, and you were actually there to see it close up and tell what it said.
Yeah. And then René, we found a rock that I just didn't pay attention to, and Cort, I sent him the image and he looked at it, and it's got a holy symbol on there, and it's a very important one. Would you like to tell him what that one is, Cort?
Sure. It resembles the Auspice of Maria symbol, which we've seen in other mysteries like the Great Cyclic Cross of Hendaye, and there are some gravestones at Rennes-le-Château that have this symbol on it. And it's also the same symbol that Saint-Sulpice uses, the order from the Da Vinci Code where the rose line was in the movie, or the array they have there in the chapel to mark the equinoxes.
Yeah.
So that's interesting as well. That's a symbol that resembles the Masonic compass and square, and it's involved in a lot of Gnostic wisdom. It's present on the Gnostic cross of James Bruce that he recovered in Alexandria as part of the Pistis Sophia, which is also a valued Gnostic text by Templar groups and knighthoods. So there's lots of connections too, and we really need to point out kind of the Knights of Malta connection to Rhode Island. Just on the most superficial level, we see that the Knights of Malta used to be called the Knights of Rhodes because their headquarters were on the Isle of Rhodes, near southwestern Turkey.
Yeah, and this, of course.
And then here we have the Newport Tower in Rhode Island.
This Cort, you have to hear this one, René. All right, Cort.
Okay.
You have to hear about the Knights of Malta history with Rhode Island. I was born in a property of the name Coggleshell, and that was one of the early colonial governor's grand descendants, okay? So the governor Coggleshell of Rhode Island, living in the island of the Newport area, but Middletown was the area. His line goes back to these royal families and have a chapel, and that's where they first brought in the first history, I believe, the first connection origin of when the Knights of Malta came. That's where they got set up on his property and a chapel that he built connected to the kings. It's pretty wild, and so you got a Rhode Island governor really early with his family going back to the right at the time when they were connected to the Templars coming over and their connection. So you have that with the early colony with Coggleshell, the governor.
Right, and we even see at the time of Robert the Bruce, Knights of Malta influence in Scotland as well.
Yeah, and then what was the other thing? We found two other important things in that same rock, René, and that was there's an ST that Cort saw it pretty well, and so did I, and this is what I was looking for. And it's a symbol that I'm going to really have to explain to people down the road because it needs some in-depth research, and it connects what I believe to the Great Seals in ancient families and also to the royal lines directly. And it's commonly seen in a lot of artworks and relics. So that was there. I mean, we found this, and they made it really fat. It's small, but it's fat. It's a fat cut. And the other interesting thing was that Cort did notice sideways, way over to the left of the rock. It's a sideways 3 cut so deep and so hard into the stone, it's so perfect that you cannot mistake it. I mean, I don't. Any academic that wants to say that that is not a 3 sideways or a symbol of that, you know, you got to go get some help. And the cool thing is, it's identical to the 3 Arabic 3 that's on the big block. But not only that, it's identical to the one on the other stone and the tiny little 3rd date on the small stone. So the one stone has 2, and then the big one has the one bigger number. And the little stone has an ST cut into it as well, so deep it cannot be missed. It's not like, oh, you got to look. It's cut in deep, so it can't mistake it. So it's almost like I'm seeing something that resembles information that would be like a claim stone in a sense. Maybe it's just a thought, and I'm not saying it's true. It just gives me this feeling that with what I know, that there's a possibility, and that's why there really needs to be some academics, but also people from the outside to come in and to really see it come together. Because I think a lot more just from this research here can bring traveling scholars into Newport, especially in the winter. They need that. I can tell you, you want to talk about a desolated place, and then it's the most busy place in the season, summer and spring and fall.
You know, when you're talking about that 3, that sideways 3, is that like a 3 that's upside down that looks like an M? Carol in the chat room was just mentioning that. Is it turned up the other way?
Well, it's just flat down on its side.
Like a W.
Take it and drop it down. Yeah, so it looks like
It's more like an M. It is.
More like an M.
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely see that. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, and you can see it's the same. Oh, you did? You have?
Yeah, I've seen that on things, and M's, being done that way.
On the Great Seals, you see them on all the Great Seals, Great Master paintings, mostly all the Scottish relics you see them in, all of them. I mean, I could find hundreds of these, but it's not. This is different. I never see it flattened down like that. They're always on their side standing. That's why I said I took the picture of the one that's where Steve said, "Hey, is that a 3?" And I told you I thought it was one of these ancient symbolese, and I just took it and didn't bother with it, until I was going to develop or download the pictures. Mm-hmm. And but it's amazing because you can really compare now these other Arabic symbols, if they are numbers, with this symbol here, and say without a doubt, there's the same hand, the same person did it. And that's a pretty amazing thing to find. So it's not just like there's one of these, there's 4. So there's a big one, this big one, a fair size one on that smaller rock, and then a smaller set of numbers next to the full set of numbers. But there's also an X. There's also a big X and then a smaller X on the rock with the 2 dates. And we were thinking about it, and Cort and I were just having a lot of fun. We had some time. The kids were sleeping, and my kids were, and we were going back and forth, and it was just like we had a great time. And I got to a link, and then all of a sudden, now this find brings us back to favoring 17th century or the late 1500s or 1600s when this could have been built. So it kind of goes both ways. You have ideas of it being really, really old, but then you still have information that connects to it being into the 1600s. And that was... I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you mentioned claimstone before, I was going to ask you, what does that mean exactly? And also Jim Bob in the chat room had the same question. Okay. Is that, you mean like claiming the land or claiming that area?
Yes, claiming the property. If you think about it, just say that this place was...
like staking your claim.
Yeah, they were staking a claim, but they built this important celestial site. Let's just say it's that, right? And for them to have a claim, they got to leave information. So how let's just not say, my theory, if it really could ever have been way in the past, it would be the royal families behind this. You're not going to have some Templars that are just some low-level barons or family members that are going to have the right. It's going to be under a king, and that's my idea. If it ever could be proven to the 1300s, and there's only one king that was in a lot of trouble and one group of people that supported the Templars that were in a lot of trouble, and that's why they made a declaration in 1320. And if this stone says 1325, we're dealing with Robert the Bruce and the Scottish. And so they're being...
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, but now...
Robert I, King of Scotland.
Robert, yeah. And, you know, he would be this line of the ancient Del Rita and the Pictish people. And then the lines are also that you see these Normans that come over, like, believe it or not, I believe the Sinclairs are, the Scott Fleming, the Scott family of the name of Scotland is Fleming, married to the royal lines, like at the highest levels of the kings, to the Stuarts, who were married with the Athalian bloodlines, the English kings and the mixes. So this is where their powers came from, their titles and rights, but you have a name change. But the Flemings still stayed together with a Fleming that was in the royal house of Biggers with the royal house of the Sinclairs. So they were all connected. And same with Sinclair's wife, Douglas. Then a Scott royal changes their name to Douglas, and that's the line there. So same people.
Right, and these are all the same people that are building the horologions or octagonal structures.
Yep.
All I've been talking about. So.
And who found the county with the Kensington runestone? Who?
That's Douglas County.
Douglas County.
That's crazy.
The controlling interest of the Hudson's Bay Company.
Big time.
In the early 19th century, and they established the Red River Colony there that includes the area where both the Kensington runestone is located and the sandstone pillar that Buff Perry has been talking about.
Oh, and René, back to Jim Bob, who had the question, is that for a land claim, if these people had a new world that is 100 Fort Knoxes, okay, the whole thing about that is that what are you going to do, just have one rock? And then a royal family is going to dispute that with their Spanish against their Spanish or other European royal cousins and say that's our land but based on one rock? It doesn't work like that. You can't. So there would be more rocks, you know. But that's why I found this. That's the second and third one that it makes me believe that there's going to be more there as well.
Right, and this is the whole reason we later may have seen the Elizabethan faction trying to kind of hijack the axis there in that manner, even as far as building Star Castle on the Isles of Scilly, which is an octagonal structure that points directly to the Newport Tower. And along this azimuth that points to the Newport Tower, the Mayflower Compact was signed. And this is a tradition of them claiming property in these kinds of contexts. And note also, even just the name of Star Castle itself feeds into the whole method by which these places were legally described and claimed.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And now one of the other theories that goes back to helping Jim Egan for his belief with his theory. I didn't know, but I saw on that one rock that there's a name Yost, and I know he's seen this. And if that name is there, and that's part of what's in his document that he has online about John Dee's engraving associate, a famous engraver named Yost Amen, was that guy really there? Is that his mark in the 1580s? Could it be?
Wow.
Yeah. Does he say it? No, I don't hear him saying it or anybody. But if it is, that would be very cool. And it just goes to show that, we don't know. And, the guy doesn't have his last name there. But there's another theory that favors Jim again. And that theory is that when I was doing this research about these X's and these numbers and dates, I came across, when I was looking at the St. Andrew's history of the flag and the X, there's a thing called a witch's post. And a witch's post is known to be used where on all pillars, lintels on the structures of doorways, right? Support structures, that they put dates, they put the St. Andrew's cross there. And this is to keep away ghosts and evil spirits.
Which is an X, right, Gary?
Which is an X, yes. Which is an X. It's the cross of St. Andrews. And that was adopted in 1320, the cross for flags in the St. Andrews history for Scotland, which is we're in the ballpark for the time. But the only thing that's going to make it tough is that there's very little known. There's a bunch of these posts surviving. They're mostly like 1600s, 1700s, a couple into the 1800s surviving. And there's not a lot on documentation of when this was created or when it happened. For all we know is that this is when it could have happened. And what does that do for Scott Wolter with his theory about this being a religious, not only a celestial site? Is that why would they need that right there to keep ghosts out? They were living in there. So how could this be a windmill if they were putting these? If this was what it is, if these go around. These would go around the whole entire openings of all the door structures. So there may be a lot more of these.
Right, and it does resemble a Templar church, especially when the stucco was on the structure. It would have looked a lot like the Templar churches on Bornholm Island that Henry Lincoln and Erling Hagensson speaks of. And a lot of architectural historians point this out, too, in their analysis of the Newport Tower.
Yeah, why another X in the stucco? Did they like double up on it? Did they do it later on, years later, so that they could keep the spirits out because it wasn't a windmill? Well, there's no reason to have people sleeping in a windmill unless you had some like children. You know, usually they kept indentured servants in there, but would they go that far for a bunch of indentured servants sleeping in a windmill? Maybe. I don't know. But it's just a theory, you know. But it's a great thing because it can still favor going back to this actually being built in the 16 and 1700s. So it's still a toss-up. And I'm not going to stand out there and say, hey, this is what it is, but this is how it was used and why it would be there. Because it's documented, it exists. But it doesn't go past the 16 or 1500s, I think. It doesn't go way past that. But they don't know. No one knows.
Wow. Well, you know, believe it or not, it's time for another quick break. And we will be right back here on Night Vision with Gary Gianotti and Cort Lindahl and me, René Barnett. We'll be right back. And you're back with Night Vision Radio. I am your host, René Barnett. I'm talking with author Cort Lindahl and researcher Gary Gianotti about Gary's recent finds at the mysterious Newport Tower. Seem to be some possible runic writing on there, seems to be some dates and things like that. And we're asking everybody to have a look, and in particular experts, you know, and please tell us what you see. Tell us what you think. Now, we were just talking about this idea of a witch post, possibly there, Gary, and you were talking about these particular symbols, the X's or the crosses that were on the witch post. And Cort, did you have something to add about that?
Gary made the observation mostly that there's two X's on the posts of the new tower, and this matches kind of the cultural application of what was known as a witch post in northeastern England during a certain period. So Gary found this and started to speculate as to what it might mean. Now, of course, the X is a runic symbol as well and can mean a lot of different things, but the idea that Gary has is great, and it's entirely possible that this is what it represents. So,
well, I wouldn't be surprised, as you know, as we were on break, I was looking at some information about witch posts online, and it's pretty interesting. And it was sort of, they were used as sort of as a hex sign on fireplaces or on doorways to prevent, you know, evil beings or witches from either flying down the chimney or coming in through any of the openings. And I think Gary was saying probably if that is a witch post symbol, there'd probably be more.
right.
Is that right? Because you would want them at every opening.
Yeah, and that's what Steve's got to get on that. That's important about the guys in Rhode Island and them. They really need to just really start scoping that out, because if it's correct, they may find it on every pillar. No doubt, it can be. I mean, it's just maybe they're so worn we can't see them. But
right, and it's interesting that the similar XX design is present in the Auspice of Maria symbol that we were discussing earlier, and it's also present on the Great Cross of Vendée. And the Auspice symbol even translates to the arms of the Montezuma family of Spain that are descendants of Emperor Montezuma of the Aztecs in Mexico. So there's a lot of different interpretations. Also, the double X was the mark put on all the royal Spanish golds. So there's a long heritage and value of that symbol in different cultures that may lead to the same meaning.
And there's alchemy symbols, I think, of magic or whatever, that they call it scrolls that go on the wood. And there's symbolism on these wood posts that you can just make them out from what few images exist. So I'm going to try to contact this museum that has them and ask for some nice photos that I can get down to have for this little bit of this work and for the people that want to see this. And it's kind of neat. And there were some marks that look like the symbolism of this ST. What is it? I don't know. So not yet. I have ideas, but
that's another interesting one, the ST. If you don't mind, guys, we're going to take a couple questions from the chat room. First one is from Bill, and he said, has any carbon dating been done? And if so, what were the findings? Do you know if there has been any carbon dating done at the Newport Tower, either one of you guys?
I know that one of the local historical groups excavated and did find post holes that seemed to indicate there was an ambulatory or kind of an awning around the Newport Tower at one point, but the carbon dating results were inconclusive.
And then somebody else did some testing in the stucco or something. They tested it, and from what I read and what I was told, that it was inconclusive. It wasn't accurate or something. It didn't work out either.
Well, those dates, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a way I'm sorry, Cort. I was wondering if there was a way to test that stucco to see if there was any possible way of dating it. Was that originally on there, or was that added later?
Well, the stucco dated to, given the things that I read about it, dated to the 17th century. So, but that,
I see.
People speculate that it could have been repaired, and there is an architectural historian that wrote it up and said originally it was clay mortar that was used in the structure, and the shell mortar later may have been added to renovate the structure.
Wow.
So it's possible that either way, it's still up in the air like everything else. So
if it's a witch's post, and it must have been used by probably people partially living there too. So prayer or whatever they were doing, monks,
whatever they were doing there. Yeah, it might have been an important spot for some reason that they wanted to keep, sacred or without, molestation by demons and ghosts and witches. But also, Neutron asks, did anyone notice if they lost GPS readings inside? Have you ever heard anything about that, or did you guys have any experiences with anything like that? Or were you too excited to notice?
I actually took a couple weird pictures, and they're like all foggy, and Cort says, "Oh, that's high speed." I mean, it's just weird. My iPhone took some bizarre pictures that were like a fog, but it was most likely when your camera moves fast, That's about it.
Yeah. But no. Cort, don't be a party pooper.
I mean,
we want to see some ghost pictures.
Yeah, I said, Cort, this is weird. I said, my camera's never. I mean, I swung my, taking pictures snapped fast on different angles. My camera's never done that before. I'll tell you that. That's the truth. But it looked like a ghost mist.
I want to see those.
And
I want to see those pictures.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. There's 3 of them in succession.
Oh, that's cool. And let's see, Bill also wants to know if this could have been used for astronomy since there are certain alignments pertaining to the construction, i.e. pillars and small windows. I think we kind of got into that a little bit already, and we were talking about certainly, Scott Walter had noted that there was something that occurred during the solstice with one of the windows in an alignment that way. And we talked about astrology, but certainly in the ancient world, astronomy and astrology were almost one and the same. I mean, they were kind of more tied together, weren't they?
Yeah, and I wanted to mention this too. That's important when it comes to the astronomers and scientists of the ancient times. I spoke to somebody about these Arabic numbers with Saxons and these families, and this one professor out in Toronto said, "Oh no, that would never exist. Would never happen." But it's like I've showed Cort. I've got the photos of Douglas, Lord Douglas, who went on the crusade, who carried the heart of the Bruce, right? His sword's engraved with 1330 or 31 on the sword, and it's exquisite, And so these families of this group were using Arabic numbers, but we were talking about how and who would have given, early on into Scotland and England, these Arabic studies and formulas, and there was one specific person, and that was a descendant of the Scott family that we're talking about, this Fleming family, and that's the wizard.
Right.
The most famous wizard that they represent as Merlin, that's how they identify him as the real Merlin of the UK and Scotland, is named Michael Scott the Wizard, and he was a lord as well. And he was one of the greatest academics and astrologers, astronomy, and Cort can tell you about what he did with designing and engineering things. So he translated Arabic books, was one of the earliest persons to do that from Scotland and England. And I'll let Cort, he can tell you more specifics about it.
All right. Well, first of all, there was likely an ephemeris collected at the Newport Tower, or a star log, that would enable them to compare their position on the globe to other places where ephemeris had been collected. So this is a tradition that was saved by the Muslims during the Dark Ages, and was later translated by people like Michael Scott. And I might add too, Michael Scott, as part of, he was kind of like a John Dee character 300 years or 400 years prior to John Dee. He was known as a magi, a traveling mystic, and he also did a lot of work in the court of Frederick II, who was the Italian Norman ruler of Sicily and Naples, which encompassed southern Italy. And Frederick II built the octagonal tower at Monte Sant'Angelo that is oriented to point to the Tower of the Winds in Athens, the International Peace Garden, and the octagonal tower in Girona, Spain. And if you look into the people that built all of these structures, they are members of the same family line.
That's wild. Now, isn't it true that you first found these alignments and these structures before you realized the family connections, right?
That's true. I was kind of just starting to come to this realization through my examination of exiled King Henry V and his association with what's known as the Frenchman's Tower here in California in Palo Alto. And he was a Stuart family member and had many Norman ancestry, family members as well, and is related to Frederick II and René of Anjou, other personages that have been mentioned in relation to the Rennes-le-Château mystery. And recently, I've even been finding that Henry V, according to many respected Rennes-le-Château researchers, contributed the money to have the Rennes-le-Château chapel renovated with Father Saunier originally. So there we see a distinct family connection in almost all of these mysteries, from Scotland to France to Italy to the United States. All of the records and the ways you can find out who was involved in creating these places linked directly back to the same people that Gary found in his studies of engraving and other relics.
Yeah, that was an amazing thing. And I want you to know about this one, Renee, with the Scott family and the connection to the Templars, okay? They haven't proven that a Fleming was a Templar, right? But they were directly connected right at the top with all these families from their bloodlines going back to Rowan, where they're from, Rowan, France, and they're all connected to the William the Conqueror's wife's families, which is Baldwin, one of the kings of Jerusalem. So we got a direct line right to the, to the kings in the Holy Land with these families directly. And so the second high steward, who is the Stuart family, is the half-brother of the Flemings. Our sister married the Fleming Scott, who changed his name. Right there, this Stuart was one of the biggest Templar supporters and aides for the Templars to come into Scotland. And on those lands of the property that were given that are the Fleming Scott families, and Battlemore is one of the first commanderies and that's their direct link to these families directly. And that's been overlooked by everybody that's a Templar scholar. Everyone in that sense. They're not seeing it. And then when I did work on the late 1500s Scott family, who's the super academic head of all the government and who controlled all of the charters, the head of chancery, Sir John Scott of Scott Starvit. In his tower, he's got the Templar Zoroastrian fire pillars in there. The identical one done on the United States Great Seal original proposal drawing. It cannot be mistaken. He drew them. The Scott family drew our Great Seals. These families are behind that. So this lord had all the rights to control for the crown all charters. And that had been in the family's title.
And basically what you're saying is all these symbols that ended up in the Great Seal and other engravings like that were put in by these families or by the Scott family. And why do you think that they chose what they chose? I mean, is it a message to someone? Is it, again, sort of a staking of a claim of these families? What do you think it means that they've incorporated those into into the Great Seal of America?
Well, they're telling you who founded this country. It's them. It's these royal families that are the mix of the Vikings, English, Scottish, going back to the ancient world of the Celts, going back all the way to the Middle East and back to Egypt. And that's what my research works on. And I'm like way into it. I mean, I'm meeting some amazing scholars, and I'm starting to learn real ancient history, and you just want to go farther back in time. But these direct families, they created our banks during the American Revolution. So pretty much everything about our founding fathers is that they were all puppets. Every one of them. So was Ben Franklin. He was a puppet. And I got more. Anyone wants to dispute me, send me a letter or an email, and I'll show you the information. Ben Franklin's grandmother, right? She was an indentured servant during the wars. So he favored the Jacobites. He was a secret Jacobite. That's who set him up. And same with George Washington. He was working for the Jacobites. And wait, you see the new stuff we're coming out with His Majesty stuff and relics, that you're going to see these symbols preserved in relics that are now going to become more valuable than coins. But I don't want to say what the relics are because it's a private project that I'm working on with a very close associate of mine that we just hit it off as friends, and the symbolism blows away anything in coins of the United States. But it's all the same symbolism, same people. They introduced the all-seeing eye, and it's been proven now. So it's a different ball of wax now. But they did it from the founding probably of this. There's no question the founding of this associated let's not just say it's just a tower, because we don't know which families or groups who built it yet. But everything else with all the land, it's pretty much solved. And with Cort's information and what he's done in my work, I would say by the end of the year I could wind up giving the full, true history of the origins of the United States back to the ancient world.
Right, and all of this kind of leads to the legend of who gave the Great Seal of the United States to Thomas Jefferson. A strange cloaked figure.
Yeah, it's Robert Scott, and he was his father was a secret Jacobite, and believed they were like the unknown superiors. He had a group of them when the Bonnie Prince revitalized the Templar history. Their families were directly a part of it, and Sir John Scott, the great-great-grandfather. I mean, to find out who these guys were and their family, it was like pulling out teeth. And there's another gentleman producing a book, a wonderful coin scholar, has done some of the genealogy, but he's found everything here in the States, and he might have found more than me on the original family, that Scott had a son. But I'm able to now, I was able to go and find out who Robert's father was and who the line was all the way back to the Flemings. And I had some Masons help me out in Scotland because they didn't know who their founding master of their lodge was. He was so secret that today they didn't even know who he was. And my work allowed them for the first time to identify George Scott, master of the Canning Gate Lodge in Edinburgh, was the founding master, and that is the father of Robert Scott. And this man's father and families were behind all the shipping lines that were created. We believe it's all the shipping lines in Scotland and Greenock. So now when you talk about these famous families going to Africa, going to the West Indies, going to the East Indies, these were some of the owners of the companies of these families directly. It's where our United States flag comes from, the stripes, the origins, and some of the colors. Ties into the links. So it's
now just for people like myself who may not be as knowledgeable in genealogy and things like that, but like for instance, I know people here in the United States named Stewart, spelled Stewart and Stuart. Now, is anyone with the name of Stewart related to that same Stewart, or is there?
Yes. I'll answer it real quick. Yes. Like Stuar is what I know. One's Catholic, and then later the other side is Protestant. So STEW is supposed to be the Protestant version, but that may not necessarily always be true. But that's what I understand about the family name. And
but they are branches of the same family. The same
line, but other people could have taken different names, taken the name too. But the original name is that I had read that the family broke off, and the Protestant name was taken to STW, or originally it was Stewart, and then it went Stewart. So then that's what I had read about by some of the families. How true it is?
Steward, that's kind of interesting. A steward is like a keeper of something.
High keeper of all the kings and all their everything, the stewards. That's what they were. That's what they were.
Yeah, and then by the same token, the Sinclairs and the St. Clairs and the Sinklers, they're all the same family, right?
No, there's a whole bunch of them a whole bunch of them aren't. They don't know. They have. All right, what I've done just by finding these documents and then having the help of Fred Fleming, and if anyone wants to learn about these families married to who would be linked to all the Templars, Fred L. Fleming has a new book hot off the press. He is the #1 genealogist in ancient history, and you will see the family connections. So I don't see a lot of these. Well, we know by DNA. I know some of the Sinclair families, and we know by DNA that some of these people who are doing a lot of research, a lot of these people are not. We don't know they don't know who's the original. It's more confusing. And this was the same thing with the Scott family. No one could prove. I went up against the greatest academic in the history of Scotland, poet, Sir Walter Scott, who could not find this information, but he actually did. He knew who it was. And so I actually found what was always known to exist, but nobody brought this history forward on who they were. Same thing with the Sinclairs. It's twisted in the same sense, but because I read stuff over and over and over, I was able to nail down that, well, why does Fleming have a kid and it doesn't say in the genealogy he has a son? He's got daughters, but doesn't have a son. And then when the roles were checked by Fred, and I asked him to back this up for me, the scholar and the families, he addressed this to these families, and you could read the letter on Electric Scotland, Gary Gianotti, and you'll see some of the work that I have on these ancient families. A lot of that stuff is, I even put my inaccurate work on there always, and it's being noted because this will teaches you how to learn. So it shows the mistakes, teaches how to learn, and then we're building up so that you'll see the corrections. But at the bottom of the link, you'll see a genealogy trail. It's a little small link. And you will find it there, and you'll be able to read what he wrote and how he made sure this was written to the DNA and to all the Stewart families, because he's associated and they're directly married to the same Scotts, Sinclairs, Douglas, the list goes on. And it's very important. And I never had much luck of many Stewarts ever talking to me from these groups, because a lot of people, they don't. They hear the name Gianotti and they're like, oh boy, here's an Italian, you know. But I grew up in a colonial town, and I was taught to learn and love English, Scottish, and French, and that's it, and German too. So it was that's my upbringing here. These were all the outcasts were from their countries, and the same families that turned against their families. So bitten by the history bug at a young age. So
yeah. Oh, it's great. You know, I didn't get into history or excited about history till much later in life. It always seemed so boring, and how is it relevant to me now as a kid? But now it's like, oh my goodness, it's the most interesting thing ever. And it's amazing how these families are all related, and how so many of us are related to these lines and may not even know it. And then it seems as though, you know, somebody was planning this country out. It wasn't just, or at least it doesn't seem to me like, we're just, a bunch of us are going to jump on a boat and escape. It seemed like there was a very, very specific plan. And I know you mentioned the Jacobites, but I know that was, sort of part of the Roman Catholic group that wanted to reinstate James II, and I guess Jacobus is like the, another name for James. And then, but to me, it seemed like a lot of these people were coming sort of in spite of the church, and possibly to, for religious freedom, like we've always heard. Well, and some of these guys, like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, apparently weren't exactly Christians until possibly on their deathbeds. I've heard. Yeah. So, do you think it really did have something to do with
these families created these specific families built Kilwinning Abbey, connected to the creation of Masonry? This is where this whole history.
Goodness, we're gonna have to continue this another time, guys. I've been told the music is playing and we got to get out of here.
Oh.
So thank you so much, Gary Gianotti, Cort Lindahl, and everybody listening. I appreciate it, especially you guys in the chat room. Thanks for sticking with us. We love you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.